Hello, my name is Peter Parfitt. Welcome to the new Brit workshop. This is the first of two videos about the construction of the main frame of my new workbench. Now I'm just about to start to do the domino work now. Now it's really important that you check all of the markings very carefully. And the way that I do legs or stiles is very simple. They usually go together in at least pairs or sometimes in fours. Now these are the outer four legs of the bench and this side facing you is the front. And I can check here that I've got a rail that comes in from each side between these two legs, and the same at the bottom. And I've put a centre line for a domino because I've got two rails, one near the bottom and one just under the top draw line. I can now open this out. I can see I've put a little oval there, and that marks those two dominoes at the top for those rails, and similarly at the bottom, an oval there and an oval there. Then I've got some rail supports for the various draw runners I'm putting in, and I've marked these as a centre line with the word rail because I will be using different sized dominoes for some of them. And I can see here that the rails from front to back here line up, the rails there front to back line up, similarly there, and at the top right here. And the reason there's no rail marking here is because we've got no drawer on the left-hand side of the bench. It's where the vise is. I'll close it up again, I'll turn it round, and we'll look at the back. And here you can see I've marked a centre line for the top rail at the back, the centre rail and the bottom rail. And I'll just turn one of these around for simplicity, and you can see I've marked where the dominoes should go, just as a second belt and braces. If I now grab the intermediate stiles, I suppose we should call them now, and these are the uprights which go between the legs on the left and the right. And at the moment I'm showing you the back. And the back has three rails that go across, one at the bottom, one in the middle, and one at the top. And these are inset into the wood, and I haven't cut those rebates yet. If I turn it round so we see the front, we can see I've got a space where an inset will go, because the rail will be going through these pieces of wood, and there'll be a rebate cut for that, and the same at the bottom. Now, as far as domino joints go, front to back, and that's now front to back, there are rails for the various draw supports. And if you look, these all line up. And on this particular one, there are 6 altogether. And if I turn it round on this side, and this is now the left hand of the inner ones, and therefore the vise is just to this side, to the left of this one. And there's only 2 positions for rails, because remember where the vise is, there is no drawer. So it's all a question of checking and double checking. And I can take one of these, I've done it already, and compare it to the actual legs to make sure that various things line up, and they do. And now it's time to do the domino cutting. And I'm going to stick to a routine for doing this. I've fitted in the domino an 8mm cutter, and I'm now going to do all the 8mm, 50mm long dominoes. And so I've set my depth here to 25. I've set this on the narrow setting. In fact, it always stays there with me, but if you're a person who likes to use the wider settings, always check that that's in narrow. Now, my rail stock is 23mm thick. And rather than setting the height here at half of that, which is 11.5mm, I've actually chosen the quick setting 22, so it's not quite in the centre, using this. And the reason I do that is for repeatability, and I will remember that I've used that 22. And that means it's doubly important to make sure when you put the dominoes in the rails that you mark the face, so putting some sort of mark on here, so I know that that's the face for this work, because that hole will be slightly off centre. The other thing I like to do in terms of the way I go about doing my domino work, I like to use these path hats, as I call them. That's just a path dog of some description. It could be a super dog. This is one of the Veritas ones that's under there. And those are there really to protect the surface of the wood from bruising or whatever. But they're quite handy for this sort of application. And the reason they're handy is that there are times when you might want to do a bit of domino work like this. And you can push against there as hard as you like, and it's held in place by these two path hats. Alternatively, you may be able to push against there and achieve the same effect. But sometimes if you're operating at this end, for example, you can't get the domino machine there, and if you wanted to put a domino right at that end, then that method, using those two path hats, is really super. And this all comes down to the fact that if you've got either the Festool MFT3, the multifunctional table, or one that you've built using the path guide system, and that is my preference, then you can easily set yourself up for this type of repeat work. And don't be too upset if you make a mistake. In my enthusiasm, I forgot to put these dominoes centre to this piece, and all I did was to fill the domino hole which I put in error with a domino, and then cut it off smooth. Let the glue dry, and then did the new domino in the correct place. And unfortunately I did it in 3 places in my enthusiasm, but that's corrected, and that'll be perfectly okay. Right, it's time to cut the channels for the various side panels and for the back panels. Now, what I do with the router table in order to know when to start and stop, because I've got a rail that comes out here, and so I don't want this channel I'm about to do for the backing to go all the way through. So I put some masking tape on the fence of the router table, and I've put some marks where I should start and stop. And remember all the normal safety things. Use a push stick, and make sure you've got eye protection, ear protection, and keep your hands away at all times. Now with these side rails, I've got to make sure I keep the face side against the fence, and these go all the way through, and I'm going to use a push stick and also a hand guide as well. And if you've not seen this hand guide before, it's some old handle. It's some sort of sanding device I've had for years and years, which is no longer any good. So the handle is useful. And I've put this block on here, and there's a V-groove at the bottom. So that allows me to get an edge on something like that. I can use it pushing from the side, use it on an edge like that. It's very, very useful. Now I've cut all the rebates in the middle 2 stile sections using the capex in the trenching position. That's with the little green lever down. You have to remember to put a distance piece at the back of your fence, otherwise you'll get a rounded bottom to your hole. And I've tidied these up on the router table by having my cutter set at the exact height for the actual trench, and then just trimming up. Being very, very careful not to catch either of the sides, which have been cut perfectly with the capex. And you really must take care when doing this, because it's very easy to accidentally catch one of these edges, and then you could injure yourself if you're not careful. So all my pieces of wood are all machined up. Hope I've done it right. We'll find out in a minute, won't we? Anyway, so I'm going to start with the two middle frame sections, and then after that I'll do the two end sections, and then we bring it all together at the very end. Now, if you've not got a domino machine, perhaps you think it's an expensive luxury. I must tell you, even for the amateur, it will transform your woodworking. It really does. It makes proper jointing using floating tenons an absolute joy, and it really is easy work, as long as you do your measuring properly, of course. And now you see the rationale for these intermediate pieces. These are the pieces that the drawer slides will fit on. You probably can't see just how square it is. It's perfectly square, and it came together square just as I pushed it together, with no adjustments needed. And that's fairly typical of the way things work. If you've got a Capex and a domino machine. And as with all these things, if you cut stuff out square, particularly when you're doing a bit of panel work like this with a sheet here, then it will all come together pretty much square. Now don't forget, you've got a little bit of wiggle room with the domino. I can see this one is not quite flush there, so I'll just give that a tap, and that's now nice and flush. And this one, it's the other way. And that's fine. And I'll just check this for square now. That is absolutely spot on, as is that. Those two bits are fine. And I'll just put this clamp in the middle. And don't forget, if you use a top that you've created with the path guide system as your cutting station, then when you cut out panels like these, they're going to be super accurate, and it really does improve the chances if you bring everything together square when you're doing cabinet work. Now, the plans for the new workbench are available, but in order for me to get them to you, I need an email address. Unfortunately, YouTube no longer have the private messaging service. However, if you put your email address in a comment to this video, the YouTube spam filter should identify that as an email address and separate it off so nobody can see it apart from me. I will then see it, I will react to it, send the plans, and then I will delete that comment so it protects your email address.